After the news recently that birth rates in England and Wales have plummeted to a new low, meaning that's more of an excuse for the powers that be to enforce more mass immigration, the BBC has done what the BBC does best and tried to twist this story into a liberal, or in this case feminist, interpretation. Now, I'm not going to make you suffer by going through this piece bit by bit, so suffice to say, their point is essentially finances are so tight for men they can't procreate. Now, it is true that finances are a dimension of the problem here, but it's far from the whole picture. After all, if it was true that it was simply finances, why do we see births increasing in the Muslim community and going down with the natives? As the government itself points out here, Muslims face some of the lowest employment rates and lowest earnings of any group in Britain. So if it's simply finances, this doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense because the core issue isn't finances. We all know that Muslims are very tight to their tradition, henceforth economics are a secondary consideration to having children. Now that may not seem very responsible to many people of European origin who try and earn enough to support their children, but that's just the way it is. However, we're still avoiding the elephant in the room, and that's that the real culprit here is liberalism and specifically feminism. Liberalist feminism has told women that by having children and getting married, you're somehow selling out your own gender's revolution. They believe that you're better off serving a boss and a corporation rather than a family. The idea is that the liberated women's path will give them much more happiness and freedom in the long run. But is that really true? Stats here from the Mental Health Foundation say that women are 3 times more likely than men to experience common mental health problems. Another thing the BBC won't mention is the modern dating market has been completely skewed by liberalism and feminism. To see how this works, think back to how our society has grown over the years. People married relatively young and then had children. Roughly speaking, this meant one man ended up with one woman. Given the birth ratio is pretty much 50-50 between men and women, that was quite a good model. It meant that society could function and recreate itself. It's why back in the day, a womanizer was seen as more of an insult. That's because it was taken as read that anybody who spends their time sleeping around with different women was upsetting the spiritual and social order of the country. Yet today, the stigma around being a womanizer has completely disappeared. It's seen as a positive thing by many men, and if we're honest, many women are drawn to those types of men because they're popular. And this leads us to the real problem in the modern dating market. There's something called the 80-20 rule, which is very important in modern dating apps. What it essentially means is that 80% of the women are going to aim for the top 20% of men. Because women have been told by feminism to aim for the top girl and sleep around if you want, it means they want to get the best deal they can possibly find. And the top 20% of men are simply going to womanize and sleep with as many women as possible. Now, all of this is happening when women are in their 20s and early 30s. That's peak ages for attractiveness and also highest likelihood of conceiving. Now, you don't have to be Einstein to figure out, and I've seen this myself in London, that these women essentially sleep their way out of getting married and having children. They instead just focus on career and sleeping around. But beneath all of this comes a bigger problem. There's 80% of men who've largely been ignored by the modern dating market. Now, some of those might get lucky and pair off, but there are still plenty left who've been forgotten. Now, the BBC article does mention this very briefly in passing when it states that women are now outperforming men at university. Yet we're left to read between the lines because the BBC won't really say what's going on here. And that's something that men have to figure out in this day and age. Women date across and up dominance hierarchies, men date across and down. What this means is as women start to out-achieve men both in academia and in the workplace, they don't want the men on offer anymore. The man they're looking for gets more and more exclusive, and she ends up just not marrying anybody nor having any children. And this is what the liberal line of "you go girl, be a strong feminist who don't need no man" and "men are toxic males who are trash" has led to. And then men, of course, take what's called the red pill. Many of the things I've noted here are common arguments in the red pill arena. And I would say that many of their arguments are actually correct. They help a man understand the world, that the world isn't one big Disney show where the princess is going to fall in love with you, where you have to grow up and be a man, and that women like masculine energy and forthright confidence. This doesn't mean you have to be Andrew Tate, but it does mean that you shouldn't be some wimpy liberal who's constantly complaining about his own existence and how toxic he is. That's not going to work well with women. But I'm not saying that the red pill is the solution here. I would agree with some of the criticisms that it can get toxic. On the one side, it just primes men to be womanizers. Essentially, they just start betraying society. And secondly, it also makes some men very bitter about women. As I've tried to express many times on this channel with regards to different issues, bitterness and anger towards the world doesn't help you. It just makes your own inner world and the outer world a darker place. The only solution, in my eyes, predictably enough, is to return to the tradition. We once had answers for these things that actively worked. Yes, it meant sacrifice on both the feminine and the masculine side, but it worked in recreating our society and ensuring the ratio of men and women who were coalescing with each other was relatively equal. And this is what the liberalists and the feminists don't seem to grasp. They've made out that tradition is evil and constraining, but then they've gone off to be a big boss woman and then wonder why the dating market around them is skewed and increasingly nihilistic and meaningless. And then when you get the angry red pill types, they say, see, look, I told you men were toxic, we need more feminism, which of course acts as an engine to just wind up more men. This is not the solution. We need to go back to sanity, social harmony, and tradition, which is rooted in love. Of course, when I'm speaking about love here, I don't mean simply sex. What I'm talking to is a transcendent heart of society, something which seeks the well-being of everybody involved in the collective. Once you have that, you'll have a healthy society. Without it, we're pretty screwed, but then we have thrown away our own tradition and Christianity with it. These are just my thoughts, however. Do let me know what you think down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel.